And I think both me and you agree the dearth of good guys, or like apparent dearth of apparent good guys, is basically sending women insane.
Hello, and welcome to the 12 Days of Tradmus. If you're new around here, my name is Kit, and Tradmus is a series I do in December where I talk about the harmful beliefs and ideas promoted by certain influencers, content creators, and so on. Basically, my normal content, but more of it and with a festive flair. And today we have a real treat. Chris Williamson posted I can't tell if this was supposed to be an interview or a conversation, but regardless, he posted a video with Rob Henderson titled, "Is Having a Boyfriend Cringe Now?" And I just shrugged and clicked, expecting a rather tepid conversation because, well, I have to admit, I read the article and I really don't understand what all the fuss is about. But, oh no. This was amazing. It hit my what threshold so many times, I immediately threw out my initial Chris Williamson Tradmus video for this one. Oh, it's so... well, let's just say this video was the one that caused me to observe on my community tab that I don't think Chris likes or respects women. It was a thought that had been percolating for some time, but this video cinched it. And as for the other guy, Rob Henderson is, per Wikipedia, an American writer and conservative political commentator known for coining the idea of luxury beliefs. Because of course he is. At this point, I think modern wisdom is just a front for conservative beliefs and evolutionary psychology. And for anyone wondering what on earth luxury beliefs are, they are, of course, leftist or liberal beliefs which confer status on the upper class at very little cost, while often inflicting costs on the lower classes. As opposed to conservative beliefs, I suppose, which of course benefit the lower classes. Has the wealth trickled down yet? Well, maybe if we give it another 4 decades. But this video isn't about that, it's about women. Because of course it is. We seem to be Chris's favorite topic. Like a caged animal at the zoo. Anyway, the cause of all this fuss is an article published in Vogue, "Is Having a Boyfriend Embarrassing Now?" by Chante Joseph. It's literally an opinion article, but people are just going to pieces, which is a bit amusing. Anyway, you know what? Let's really commit. Let's settle in, get a drink, and read the article. If someone so much as says, "my boyf" on social media, they're muted. There's nothing I hate more than following someone for fun, only for their content to become my boyfriendified suddenly. This is probably because, for so long, it felt like we were living in what one of my favorite substackers calls boyfriend land, a world where women's online identities centered around the lives of their partners, a situation rarely seen reversed. Women were rewarded for their ability to find and keep a man with elevated social status and praise. It became even more suffocating when this could be leveraged on social media for engagement and, if you were serious enough, financial gain. However, more recently, there's been a pronounced shift in the way people showcase their relationships online. Far from fully hard-launching romantic partners, straight women are opting for subtler signs, a hand on a steering wheel, clinking glasses at dinner, or the back of someone's head. On the more confusing end, you have faces blurred out of wedding pictures, or entirely professionally edited videos with the fiancé conveniently cropped out of all shots. Women are obscuring their partner's face when they post, as if they want to erase the fact that they exist without actually not posting them. So what gives? Are people embarrassed by their boyfriends now? Or is something more complicated going on? To me, it feels like the result of women wanting to straddle two worlds. One where they can receive the social benefits of having a partner, but also not appear so boyfriend-obsessed that they come across as quite culturally loserish. They want the prize and celebration of partnership, but understand the norminess of it, says Zoe Senmudzi, writer and activist. In other words, in an era of widespread heterofatalism, women don't want to be seen as being all about their man, but they also want the clout that comes with being partnered. But it's not all about image. When I did a call out on Instagram, plenty of women told me that they were, in fact, superstitious. Some feared the evil eye, a belief that their happy relationships would spark a jealousy so strong in other people that it could end the relationship. Others were concerned about their relationship ending and then being stuck with the posts. I was in a relationship for 12 years and never once posted him or talked about him online. We broke up recently and I don't think I will ever post a man, says Nikki, 38. Even though I am a romantic, I still feel like men will embarrass you even 12 years in, so claiming them feels so lame. But there is an overwhelming sense, from single and partnered women alike, that regardless of their relationship, being with a man was an almost guilty thing to do. On the Delusional Diaries podcast, fronted by two New York-based influencers, Hallie, and Jazz, they discuss whether having a boyfriend is lame now. Why does having a boyfriend feel Republican, reads a top comment. Boyfriends are out of style. They won't come back in until they start acting right, reads another with thousands of likes. In essence, having a boyfriend typically takes hits on a woman's aura, as one commenter claimed. Funnily enough, both of these hosts have partners, which is something I often see online. Even partnered women will lament men and heterosexuality, partly in solidarity with other women, but also because it is now fundamentally uncool to be a boyfriend girl. It's not just in these women's imaginations. Audiences are icked out by seeing too much boyfriend content, myself included, it seems, as indicated by my liberal use of the mute button. When author and British Vogue contributor Stephanie Yeboah hard-launched her boyfriend on social media, she lost hundreds of followers. Even if we were still together, I wouldn't post them here. There is something cringy and embarrassing about constantly posting your partner these days, she tells me, adding that, there is a part of me that would also feel guilty for sharing my partner constantly, especially when we know the dating landscape is really bad at the moment. I wouldn't want to be boastful. Sophie Milner, a content creator, also experienced people unfollowing her when she shared a romantic relationship. This summer, a boy took me to Sicily. I posted about it on my subscriber section, and people replied saying things like, please don't get a boyfriend. She admits that her content perhaps becomes less exciting when she is in a relationship. Being single gives you this ultimate freedom to say and do what you want. It is absolutely not every woman, but I do notice that we can become more beige and watered down online when in a relationship, myself included. From my conversations, one thing is certain. The script is shifting. Being partnered doesn't affirm your womanhood anymore. It is no longer considered an achievement, and if anything, it's become more of a flex to pronounce yourself single. As straight women, we're confronting something that every other sexuality has had to contend with, a politicization of our identity. Heterosexuality has long been purposefully indefinable, so it is harder for those within it and outside of it to critique. However, as our traditional roles begin to crumble, maybe we're being forced to reevaluate our blind allegiance to heterosexuality. Obviously, there's no shame in falling in love, but there's also no shame in trying and failing to find it. Or not trying at all. And as long as we're openly rethinking and criticizing heteronormativity, having a boyfriend will remain a somewhat fragile or even contentious concept within public life. This is also happening alongside a wave of women reclaiming and romanticizing their single life. Where being single was once a cautionary tale, you'll end up a spinster with loads of cats, it is now becoming a desirable and coveted status. Another nail in the coffin of a centuries-old heterosexual fairy tale that never really benefited women to begin with. End quote. Please observe me linking this article below, Chris, as well as any other sources, which is not a courtesy he offers in return. Anyway, my first thought upon reading this article was, let me grab it from Blue Sky, or people don't want to be judged by their relationship status, their partner doesn't want to be on socials, they want to keep their romantic life private. I do appreciate the conclusion, and I hope we're past the point where a romantic relationship means a woman gives up everything else. I do think, with the rise of trad wives and, as Sarah Peterson calls it, husband veneration content, being heterosexual has become politicized, whereas before it was just seen as a default, and that might be an adjustment. Anyway, I see nothing horrible in that article, and it's an opinion piece. But anyway, Robin, Chris they had some interesting takeaways. EvoPsych is really quite fascinating, and honestly, I think it says more about the believers than it does about the people they claim to study. I found a comment on Reddit that I think sums up my skepticism pretty well. There's methodological, did I say that right? barriers to investigating psychological phenomena from the evolutionary perspective, since mental activity doesn't fossilize. Most theories in evolutionary psychology are untestable hypotheses, or what are known as just-so stories in evolutionary thought, basically just speculate on how natural selection may have selected for certain psychological phenomena initially. It's also fairly reductionistic, as it often applies simple biological principles to complex psychological phenomena that can easily be influenced by culture. Evolutionary psychology is better treated as a perspective through which we can view psychological phenomena rather than a rigorous scientific discipline in itself. And I just want to say, I can understand the desire to understand humans, but the EvoPsych folks that tend to get platformed, in my opinion, have the most reductive views of humans and basically boil everything down to reproduction, which, why do we bother having brains then? Anyway, let's get into this video before this becomes 3 hours long.
What do you make of this "is having a boyfriend cringe now" article?
Yeah, that was going around. So I first came across that Vogue magazine article. It was a reel on Instagram, and someone was commenting on it. And then I saw that this magazine article is having a boyfriend embarrassing now. It inspired, 1,000 Instagram reels, TikTok, all these commentaries. And so I went back and read the actual piece. It was a striking headline. And, the first thing it made me think of was intersexual competition, because as I'm reading this article, the author, she's talking about, influencers and podcast hosts, these women with a lot of influence and status, and they're talking about how, they try to not talk about their boyfriends that much, or they try to discourage other women from entering relationships, this idea of heterofatalism. Um, but of course, like the funny thing to me was these women themselves are in relationships. And, she would ask, well, why are you promoting these ideas? And these women would say, well, I don't want to seem boastful. I want to show solidarity with single women. And I understand how difficult the dating market is right now. And so, it is a little embarrassing to post about my relationship online and this kind of thing. And yeah, to me, connecting it with evolutionary psychology, I think there are some interesting principles here around, competition, reproductive suppression, and that kind of thing.
Where in the article did anyone say they tried to discourage women from relationships? And as a side note, my jaw really hates the word relationship, so please bear with me. Anyway, if, like me, you're wondering what on earth reproductive suppression is, Wikipedia is here to save us. Reproductive suppression is the prevention or inhibition of reproduction in otherwise healthy adult individuals. So, I'm supposed to believe that a woman not wanting to share pictures of her boyfriend on socials because she sympathizes with the plight of single women or whatever is reproductive suppression? Has it occurred to these folks that not everything has to be shared online? I assume they're coming at it from the angle of women will read this article and not get a boyfriend because they're introduced to heterofatalism, but I'm very sorry to be the one to say that women weren't conditioned or brainwashed or whatever into heterofatalism, which, as I understand it, is a profound, weird disappointment with men in the landscape of modern dating. And side note, I hate the phrase modern dating. Anyway, it's just something that can happen after going on a lot of dates. I dated a lot in 2011 through 2014, and oh my goodness. It wasn't that the men were bad, they were just boring. And I don't mean, oh, Sam didn't drive a nice car or Bobby didn't make enough money. I mean, they just talked about themselves. They would ask me one or two questions, and the rest of the time I was keeping the conversation going. And, when I know everything about you and you know my name and my job, which hilariously is what these men asked about, even though these alpha bros claim men don't care about women's careers, it's just not fun for me. And yes, dating should be fun. I'm an optimist, by the way, which is why I'm not personally a heterofatalist, but I can see why women would be. More to Hate did a great article about men not talking, which I'll link below. And since we're talking about dating, I want to share my favorite dating story. So in 2011, I was living in Colorado Springs and I met this guy and we went to a bar. And though we were able to talk okay via email, in person, things were stilted. I stuck it out for an hour though, and I know he was as bored as I was. But when we were leaving, he asked if I wanted to go for a walk in the park. So I looked at the park, dark because it was nighttime and empty, and said, no thank you. To which he responded, okay, call me when you stop being afraid of people. And I'm just like, bro, we just bored each other nearly to tears for an hour. Why would I spend more time with you? And also that response was very odd and it makes me question the situation even more. Was he trying to neg me into changing my mind? But anyway, that's my favorite dating story. And you know what? No regrets. But anyway, back to Chris and Rob.
If you're a woman with power, status, influence, and so on, you have some non-trivial effect on the behavior of other women. And if you are telling them that maybe it's not worth it to date anymore, men are trash, it's so hard out there, having a boyfriend is embarrassing now anyway, but then privately you're in a relationship and you are, following those conventional life script patterns, you're kind of indirectly suppressing other women's ability to find partners, to reproduce, and that kind of thing.
So I do think it's possible for celebrities, and that includes influencers, to influence what you buy and to an extent beauty standards. But I would like his source for the idea that women are being influenced into not being in romantic relationships with men by other women online who are in relationships themselves. How do we know those women are dating men? I'm assuming they're not posting them publicly since that would ruin their brand. And given the amount of times I've been accused of telling women men are trash when I've never said or even thought anything like that, my confidence in people's media literacy, even people like Rob Henderson and Chris Williamson who should know better, is low. But yeah, I would love some stats to see if this is an actual thing or a TikTok trend. Also, people aren't obligated to post everything about their lives online, even if they're official influencers. And that is one of the reasons we should take everything we see on socials with a large grain of salt.
So I listened to this very interesting discussion by this evolutionary behavioral scientist, Danny Solikowski. And she's done a few interviews on this question of reproductive suppression. And one thing she points out is a lot of this anti-natalist messaging comes from elite institutions, people with platforms, journalists and academics and corporate leaders of I see this a lot in social science journals, for example, like the motherhood penalty, that kind of thing of, oh, if you have children, you're going to be penalized in the labor market. But you never see the reverse framing where if you choose to work and not stay with your kids, this is also a penalty in a way because there's a limited window of your child's life where you can spend a lot of time with them and where you're like literally the number one person in their world.
I think Rob is trying to compare two different things here. The opposite of the motherhood penalty isn't, or you could stay home. The opposite is the fatherhood bonus. Why do men get a boost when they become parents, but mothers are punished? And at that, why wouldn't men also be told that there's a limited window in their children's lives when they can spend so much time with them and be their world? I'm also sensing some privilege here. If you choose to work, and studying and talking about these things isn't antinatalism. Antinatalism is the philosophical value judgment that procreation is unethical or unjustifiable. Studying how women are treated when they become parents isn't antinatalist.
Every hour you spend in the workplace is an hour you're not watching your child grow and develop and learn and form that kind of attachment.
Is he also worried about fathers not forming attachments to their children because of work, or is this concern reserved for mothers only?
The happiest people are married people with children. If you look at women, single women without children are the least happy. They report the lowest levels of happiness. Married women report slightly higher levels of happiness than that. And then married women with children report the highest levels of happiness of all. And so if I'm trying to promote an idea, trying to shape your behavior in such a way that will reduce your happiness, then there is a kind of an element of a luxury belief there.
I have so many thoughts. First, why are two men, who so far as I can tell are single without children, talking about women's happiness regarding marriage and children? Why aren't they concerned about men's happiness in this situation? Why do we always focus on women when we speak of marriage? I'm assuming Rob's stats are true, but has it occurred to either of these two that women who don't want to marry are no longer doing so because they can support themselves, there's less social pressure, etc., which can then drive up the yes, I'm happy responses in these surveys, because only people who want to marry are getting married? Why do they seem to assume it's being married and having kids that makes women happy in these situations, not who they're marrying and having those kids with? Just a thought. They don't talk about this because for some reason, they're more interested in the idea that women are being dissuaded from relationships by people they don't even know. Which reminds me of Rob's luxury belief thing, and this is just ridiculous. Elite institutions or people or whatever aren't coming to conclusions because, though happily married themselves, they want other people to suffer. And other people aren't reading studies and opinion articles trying to figure out if they should get married or not. I have no doubt that some people do, but by and large, that is not how people make decisions. Good grief. Also,
this ties in with Freya India's idea, which is most relationships now are more brand collaborations than they are meaningful connections.
Wow. Yeah. Damn, that is good.
Both of these men need to get off social media. I'm calling it now. They've got TikTok brain and have forgotten that most people aren't influencers and that a TikTok trend is not a societal trend.
And it's funny, like a lot of society seems to be participating in this, discouraging of committed relationships, bonds, family formation.
Citation needed.
You brought up Freya India there. I remember a really interesting essay of hers where she pointed out that if you are a 23-year-old woman and you're a recent college grad, you're in the workforce, you're hustling, you're struggling, you're working hard, and you're dating around, you're on the apps, you go on a date here and there. Your parents are probably just thinking, okay, good. This is what you should be doing at this age, dating, exploring yourself, whatever. But then Freya pointed out that if you are a 23-year-old woman and you tell your parents, I'm engaged, a lot of educated upper middle class parents would respond with horror. Like, you're too young for this. You're going to ruin your career. Like, you're derailing your life. Like, why are you giving up everything for this guy? That kind of thing.
Citation needed.
And this is like the reverse of what you would expect in more traditional societies or even our society up until maybe 50, 60 years ago. That if you're a young woman and you find a guy you like enough to want to marry, your family would celebrate, society would celebrate, and now it's literally the reverse.
Yeah, we don't have bridal showers or engagement parties or baby showers or bachelorette trips or anything like that anymore. These days, we just have funerals for young women's freedom.
That's interesting. I wonder what sort of parents would be like that. At least in my experience, all of my friends who have got married pretty young, their parents were super stoked for them, but that might just be, I might have an unreasonably normal and responsible set of friends with parents.
No, that's normal. I would venture a guess that that's the response most parents would have. 23 is, in my opinion, young, but you've graduated, you're working, you're an adult.
And I think both me and you agree the dearth of good guys, or like apparent dearth of apparent good guys, is basically sending women insane.
Okay, but who's the one overanalyzing an opinion article? Honestly, I think they missed the point, but I'm not Chante Joseph, so who am I to make that call?
Like, if you can't find an eligible male partner, you still have all of the drive to do stuff.
Do stuff? What sort of stuff? I'm just being annoying. I know what he means. I think. I don't know. He starts talking about intrasexual competition being heightened and learning to settle due to the perceived dearth of eligible men, and I just giggle because of reasons I'll share in my week 2 Patreon video, but I will say this is giving me the impression that Chris likes the idea of women competing for him, and that both Chris and Rob have low opinions of women. Concerned about your friend's new boyfriend? You're trying to introduce doubt into her mind, so either you can have the guy yourself, or your friend can be single like you, not because you actually have concerns. Single in general? You clearly think other women should be as well, so you can up your chances of finding a guy, so you try to convince them men are the worst. Of course, they say this, they say it would be easier to convince women to go on a sex strike, that it would be easier for women to stick to her men are trash principles, and then they also say,
well, look at the 4Bs movement in South Korea.
Yeah. And I think we saw a version of that attempt to lift off in the U.S. after the election, but I don't hear it.
Oh yeah, I'm swearing off all men until Donald Trump is out of office because men voted this man in. Yeah, I wonder how long that lasted.
So it's easy to convince women to go off men and stay single, but also women won't actually stick to it. Pick one. It can't be both. And also, this is why you shouldn't mistake a TikTok trend for a movement. And 4B wasn't about women convincing other women to be single because they were, and they wanted the men for themselves. Women in South Korea have been and are treated abusively by men, and 4B was a response to that. Now, Chris likes to talk about how women will talk down a woman's boyfriend on socials, but men rarely do the opposite, but here is one example he sees.
This guy and this girl were about to go to a wedding, and a girl was in front of him, and he was sort of stood quite stoically, maybe posing for a photo because it was a vertical video, and he looked sort of like he was trying to pose for a photo or just like waiting, and she was like doing dances and like doing like this and like sort of moving around, and the caption was once there are certain girls who are one in a billion. Once you've dated someone like her, there is no other. And the number of guys that were in the comments it was basically like, this girl is so free. She's a flighty bird. Like, look at the energy that she's bringing to it. It seemed like a sort of pro chick video, and dudes in the comments were like, this girl looks like a fucking nightmare. Like, she's not chill. She's evidently, from their perspective, sort of advertising her sexual availability despite the fact that she's in a relationship with this guy. She looks quite disagreeable. She looks like she isn't going to be trainable. She looks like she isn't going to be able to, you know what I mean? Like all of the like sort of online internet problems.
A woman dancing in the video, which her boyfriend apparently praised her for, and commenters are saying she's advertising her sexual availability and doesn't look trainable. Trainable. Like she's a dog.
But you make a great point that if a girl gets into a relationship, I was talking to my housemate's girlfriend, and she was saying loads of girls who get into relationships end up losing their friend groups, not in the way that guys do. Guys lose their friend groups because it's like, oh, he's fucking wifed up again. The old ball and chain means that he's not going to hang with us. But as soon as he's sort of, that's not because they feel bad that the guy's in a relationship. It's that the dude is not allowed out or that he's spending too many evenings watching Netflix. The reason for the girls, I think, is, again, if you're struggling to find a partner and your friend gets into a happy relationship, that throws into harsh contrast the fact that you do not have a partner, and that makes you feel pretty uncomfortable. So again, if you can't get what you want, you must teach yourself to want what you can get.
Setting the "my wife was so controlling" jokes aside, so if a woman gets into a relationship, she'll lose her female friend group because her female friends are jealous that she's no longer single. I'm going to need a source for that, and in my experience, the friends just kind of dissolved because after getting into a relationship, the woman in question just didn't want to hang out anymore. And there's only so many times people hear, oh, I'm going to hang out with Brad tonight, or oh, Jack called and he wants to do whatever, so I have to cancel before they give up. Anyway, here's something insane.
Like suppression of fertility thing, the mating suppression thing is really interesting because it happens hormonally, right? You can actually step in and this is one of the potential explanations for why human females have got concealed ovulation.
Yes.
Can you dig into that and then sort of the hormonal, because we've got two forks on how the mating suppression thing is going on here, the fertility suppression. One is like literally hormonally, you can fuck with women. And the other side is like socially in terms of their drive, mimetically, what is it that they're trying to do? I think that's the right way to frame it, right? We've got one side, which is a physiological intervention, and the other side, which is a mimetic or cultural intervention.
The first thing that came to mind was birth control. Like, it's literally a hormonal manipulation technology. And I think about like one of the founders of birth control, Margaret Sanger? Like, she thought that this would be good for poor people, low income people, historically marginalized people. And that's as we've been describing, it's a very nice story to tell. You're helping these women, but then on the other hand, she's also reducing the number of children out there, the number of women who are reproducing, potential competitors and rivals. And so, if you can, and you see this with non-human primate species like tamarins and baboons, where dominant females in these hierarchies, sometimes it's like open, like intimidation and bullying tactics, harassment. Like, they'll push these subordinate females around, they'll scream at them, they'll prevent them from having access to food and resources, because obviously if there's a malnutrition factor going on here, then they're not going to be able to reproduce. This also elevates cortisol and stress hormones that can suppress ovulation and fertility. And so, you see this very clearly in these primate groups. But then for humans, there's a version of this that's more so mediated through culture and through, socialization and technology and these kinds of things where, you don't usually see human women like openly bullying, but you can increase stress through indirect means. So, we talked about the pill, but then beyond that, you can also, spread memes. You can tell them that actually family formation is unwise or irresponsible, or actually you can have a much more fulfilling life if you focus on yourself, on self-care, on career, on climbing the corporate ladder, on foregoing dating altogether. Sometimes you'll see these articles, like every 2 or 3 years, I see like these legacy media outlets will say like, well, why can't we focus on friendship rather than romance? And it's targeted toward women, where women should, we should decenter romantic relationships and instead replace it with friendships. And so, women should form these, female communities and forgo men altogether, stop dating men. And all of these things, too, reduce fertility.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that women don't think about other women's fertility at all, actually. And we certainly don't try to purposely stress other women out so they can't get pregnant. And no, talking generally about the risk of pregnancy and birth isn't an attempt at reproductive suppression. I was going to say, what the hell, but are these two trying to twist it so that if women talk about how difficult relationships are, how dangerous pregnancy can be, it's not women being honest, it's women trying to, I'm so tired of saying this, reproductively suppress other women? Judging from the topic right now and how one of the first things they introduced was the idea that married mothers are happiest, it seems like they're setting up the belief that, for women, marriage and motherhood will make them happiest. And anyone saying otherwise is just trying to trick you into being miserable like they are. I don't know if Rob and Chris are consciously trying to do that or not, but if so, that's really low. And Diabolical Lies is doing a series about childbirth in America, which I highly recommend checking out. I'll link it below, though that episode might be paid access only. Back to Rob and Chris. Rob thinks expensive weddings, college degrees, giving each kid their own bedroom, etc. is a way elite women induce stress and issues around fertility among low-income women. Now, you might think...
I can already sort of... imagine what cogs would be turning in a well-meaning woman's mind who may be partaking in this sort of a meme. They would say, what are you talking about? I don't think these things at all. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to get my friends to stop getting into relationships. The guys out here just aren't very nice, and I'm trying to protect my friends from getting hurt. And men are trash sometimes, or maybe even a lot of the time. And these are just me. Like, how can you imbue on me all of these supposed motivations when that's not what I'm doing at all? And I think it's important to just say the difference between proximate and ultimate reasons. Very rarely are we aware of what the ultimate reasons for our behavior are. Like, you are much more effective at deceiving other people if you also are deceived by the motivation that you're doing this through, right?
That's right, ladies. Have you considered that you might be lying to yourself? These two are unreal. And I'm sure everyone now understands why I posted that I didn't think Chris Williamson liked or respected women. Because you can't talk about women this way and actually think they're people.
I think the thing that makes it particularly unpalatable or like weird to talk about in a way, even I find myself being like, fucking hell, like this really doesn't paint women in a particularly flattering light.
You also can't write all women off as jealous and vengeful, knowingly or not, and think of them as people. Perhaps Chris should spend more time in the real world and less time in the studio.
And I've said this to every intersexual like fucking Tanya Reynolds, Deborah Lieberman, like whoever it is that I'm talking to from the EP world on the woman's side. I'm so glad that I'm not a woman. Like it would be, I'm not constructed, and I just don't have the mindset to be able to deal with the very fine, finessed, like delicate gamesmanship balance thing that needs to be done to be able to navigate this stuff. It's a real samurai blade meets a scalpel of sort of social dynamics.
Me neither. And yet, I'm still a woman. Go figure. Anyway, we're going to talk about short hair, which is something I can speak on from personal experience.
And when you sort of spin all of this together, you end up with women being very pro short haircut. Oh, yes. You should cut it off. You've got the breakup hair. Cut it all off. Cut it all. You're going to look, girl, you look beautiful. It's going to look so cool and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you know that guys prefer long hair. Like very reliably, it's a sign of youth, it's a sign of fertility, it's a sign of fecundity. Men on average prefer longer hair on women, and women that are high in intersexual competition advise potential sexual rivals to cut off more hair.
Yes.
So, as everyone I'm sure knows, I shaved my head in December 2023. This is not a haircut. This is the grow out from that, I don't even know what to call it, experiment thing I did, whatever. Anyway, every time I floated the idea to friends, they said no. So, of course, I did it anyway. The studio was very supportive. There was a boy around 12 there who thought it was cool. And when everyone saw what I had done, they were shocked. And it wasn't until it began growing out that they would tell me how cute my hair is and how long it's getting. And when I would tease shaving it again, they would shut it down. But, you know, a female friend and a female cousin did express support and say it was cool. Perhaps they were trying to keep me out of the dating pool. But my friend is married to a woman and is across the country from me, and my cousin is also across the country, and our taste in men is very different. And for that matter, we're very different, so any man interested in her would not be interested in me. Maybe they were just showing support? Nah, women can't possibly feel affection or any kind of emotion toward one another, and if we think we do, we're just lying to ourselves. Oh, and of course, everything we do and think is in service to what men find attractive.
Same thing with spiders. They don't know why they weave webs, but all of these things occur because they inherited these genes that led them to partake in behaviors that enhance the likelihood of survival and reproduction. I think the same thing is true for humans. So many of our behaviors we're unaware of. They operate under the hood. Except
humans have brains and we're able to communicate with words. As this man knows, he writes. And I don't buy for 1 second that he doesn't know rage bait gets more clicks and attention than positive or even neutral content, and that is why more people go the "this is what you shouldn't do" route. Anyway, Rob has some thoughts about progressive feminists that Chris seems confused about, so let's clear that up for him.
Women in positions of power, corporate leaders, senior academics, influential media figures create environments that make reproduction difficult for the women below them. They do it through culture and expectations. Long work hours become mandatory. Women who prioritize family are passed over for promotions. The message is clear. Serious women don't have children, or at least they don't let children slow them down. The subordinate women absorb this message. This helps explain something puzzling about modern feminism. This is so fucking good. Progressive feminists often criticize capitalism. They talk about how corporations exploit workers, how the pursuit of profit harms people, how we should value things other than career success. Yet, the same voices insist that there's no higher priority for young women than organizing their lives around a career. Many of these elite women have partners. Many of them have children. They figured out how to balance career and family, or they had resources that made it easier.
It's funny. The only time I hear this claim that feminists want to tear down capitalism while also telling women to build their lives around their career to the exclusion of everything else is from anti-feminists. How odd. It's almost like it's BS. But yes, this is what made people realize that liberal feminism, capitalist feminism, mainstream feminism, whatever you want to call it, isn't enough. As it turns out, having more female CEOs doesn't actually change things for other women. If a woman gets to be CEO or prime minister or some other high-ranking role, and she's only interested in maintaining the status quo, That's great for her, but not anyone else. And feminism for me, business as usual for thee, is not, in my opinion, feminism. And I really doubt that those women would describe themselves as progressive feminists. If they were, they would be working to change the system to everyone's benefit. A CEO is much better positioned to do so than, for example, the receptionist.
Squaring of the circle of capitalism is bad, down with this sort of modern economic system, and your career is the most important thing in the world. Make sure you go to college, university, complete your degree, go and chase down the career. Like, I've never thought that those two things don't square, but that's fucking brilliant. I thought it was so good.
Could someone please tell Chris that a system can be bad, but so long as you have to live within that system, you have to live within it? I'm not a fan of capitalism. I think it has wreaked havoc on our planet, bodies, and minds. But I still have to live within it, which means I still have to ensure I'm financially solvent. Rob also doesn't seem to understand this, which baffles me. I'm not an educated professional like him, but I still understand that, yes, the more money I make, the easier my life will be and the more I can do. That doesn't mean I suddenly approve of or want capitalism. Diabolical Lies also did an episode about the rise and fall of capitalism, which I'll link below as well. Anyway, if you're wondering why so-called elite women who already have a husband and kids would want to reproductively suppress subordinates, it's so a younger woman doesn't steal that husband.
And I know that men, as they age, are still, often very desirable to younger women.
Older men aren't as desirable to young women as they like to think they are. Oh, and age gap discourse. Also, women just being jealous. Not calling out the red flag of a man dating someone half his age. Nope, it's just jealousy.
Jamie Krems taught me probably the most unpalatable theory. The only people left are people that are like amenable to this. So I think we're safe now. Once you get an hour into a podcast, like all of the people that hated it have self-selected out.
That's what 3x speed is for.
Jamie Krems gave me the most ruthless, proximate versus ultimate explanation for pro-life versus pro-choice.
Mm-hmm.
That being pro-life means that the cost of casual sex increases. And if you look at the data, if the decision, this is the maddest thing, dude, if the decision around women's bodies was left up to men, like men are trying to control women's bodies, if the decision around women's bodies and reproductive rights was left up to men, they would almost certainly have all access to abortion. If you look at the voting and the preferences, women are more pro-life than they are pro-choice, and this skews older.
Quote, 61% of women now identify as pro-choice, but only 41% of men say the same, Gallup found. End quote. I'm very curious about what source Chris is using for that statement, and though these two are very happy to discuss how women might tell themselves some noble story about why they're telling a friend about her boyfriend's red flags, when in reality they're just jealous, they're apparently oblivious to the men who will sign an abortion ban during the day and fly their mistress off to get an abortion at night. Interesting.
So you might say, well, women who go through the beauty of childbirth and see just how wonderful it is to bring a young baby into this world,
as opposed to an old baby,
don't want women that are about to have a kid or potentially going to have a kid to miss out on that. Also, there is this sort of connection to the beauty of rearing a child. You see this life come into the world and you want to protect that. But on the other side, you could say, well, I now am beholden to my male partner. His resources and his investment in me is very important to the future survival of both me and my child. And maybe some younger women might tempt him away. And if I am able to make it more difficult for them to have casual sex by raising the price of casual sex, by making access to birth control more difficult, they may be less likely to engage in casual sex, and as such, my male partner, who I want to look after me and my child, is less likely to engage in casual sex because there's going to be fewer potential suitors.
So, to be clear, that elite woman thinks that by outlawing abortion and or birth control, that will deter her husband and this younger woman from sleeping together? That is stupid. Laws don't preclude elites from doing whatever they want, as we well know. And we also know that abortion bans and birth control restrictions affect lower income folks the most.
That was the most fucking unpalatable theory. Like, people fucking hated it because on the surface, it's like, what do you mean? I just don't want to kill babies. I don't want to destroy the future. I need to fix the birth rate. This is like part of the downfall of society. Like, When someone feels like they're doing something so good, and this is why I think the visceral response, body positivity. What do you mean? Well, like including these women, like you just want to be exclusionary. You just want to tell people they're not. What do you mean about this? What, like, men are trash. They're not looking after these women. They're like the 10 million men aged 20 to 54 are unemployed. You want us to just be man keeping and all of these things up front sound so laudable, and to hear that what on the surface is pro-social, charitable, and maybe a position that you take pride in. You're like, I'm proud of the fact that I am such a pro-social, caring person, that I do this for the world. To then have a hole poked in it and for someone to say, interesting, shame that it's total, like, shallow self-promotion and survivalism that's more exclusionary than it is inclusionary. People don't seem to take that very well.
Well, no, people don't tend to take very well the idea that they're just lying to themselves about, well, apparently everything they believe in or do. That's actually really insulting to presume you know a stranger better than they know themselves. Anyway, they wax on about abortion for a bit, and perhaps pregnancy shouldn't be considered a cost that one either has to pay or get out of. But hey, that's just the opinion of someone who is pro-choice. Which apparently means I just want to have penalty-free promiscuous sex. That I don't want women dying of sepsis in parking lots is just something I tell myself to feel better about my beliefs. Humans, this conversation has taught me, have the depth of a piece of paper. Anyway, they talk about the swag gap, and it strikes me that this has turned into Chris theorizing and Rob saying, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. They also seem to conflate influencers with the average person, and well, let me know in the comments if you're concerned about having a swag gap with your partner. Anyway, in conclusion...
Dude, I am stuck in a world where I can't work out if this is TikTok brain slop or a genuine insight into important mating trends that will literally shape the future of humanity.
I would strongly advise Chris to get off TikTok and go outside. And not to the yacht club or pool or wherever it is he said he liked to conduct research, but just walk around a bit, talk to people. Anyway, it's entirely possible evo-psych is a valid science field, but this conversation just seems like Rob stating things as fact that he can't possibly know. Women who counsel other women against bad boyfriends aren't doing it out of concern, but because they secretly want to sabotage their friend. And even if the women say, no, we're really just concerned about our friend, they're lying. And you know that. How? You can't read minds in 2025, and you definitely can't tell what was on someone's mind 100, 500, 10,000 years ago. I do appreciate, though, that you can't take a woman on faith. Unless she's a married mother telling you how happy she is. Then, of course, you can believe her and not think she's lying to herself. Anyway, did you think we were done? Oh no, I am committed to making a 3-hour video. Matriarchal Blessing posted about the Vogue article on Substack, and I'll link it below if you'd like to read in full, but I found this part especially interesting. Quote, having a boyfriend isn't embarrassing, gender inequality is embarrassing. In our #girlpower, #bossbabe era, girls grow up hearing they can have anything they want, anything a man has. And in many ways, that is turning out to be true. More women than men now go to college and have advanced degrees. More single women are buying houses than single men. But when it comes to equality in their relationships, well, turns out women can have anything they want except that. Even when wives earn more money than their husbands, they still do more childcare and housework while their husband has more leisure time. Studies show that women overwhelmingly do more of the emotional and logistical work of maintaining a relationship, initiating hard conversations, organizing date nights and vacations, and going to therapy. Women are more likely than men to relocate for their partner's job. Heterosexual sex is more likely to center male desire, and women are more likely to sacrifice to maintain sexual harmony in a relationship. And that is embarrassing. It is embarrassing to have on public display just how unequally women are treated in heterosexual relationships. Patriarchy is embarrassing. Inequality is embarrassing. But just because it's embarrassing doesn't mean we should hide it. I'm not sure not posting about boyfriends is the harbinger of progress it's being hailed as. If having a boyfriend is still in, but exposing anything about their harmful behavior is out, aren't we dialing back the clock of progress? Going back to a time where a woman was all too happy to send out those wedding invites, but kept the fact that her husband treated her like a child a secret, even to her closest friends and relatives. I actually think it's a mark of progress to open women's eyes on a mass scale, for women to speak to each other honestly and openly about what it's like to be in a relationship with a man, both the good and the bad. End quote. In conclusion, Chris Williamson's channel is another avenue for pushing patriarchal beliefs on the younger generation under the guise of helping. Seriously, his channel banner says, life is hard, this podcast will help. And, going back to what Chris and Rob were saying, they might tell themselves they're just looking out for women, they're just interested in this from an intellectual standpoint, but whether they realize it or not, they're trying to convince viewers that women not falling in line and just being happy to have a male SO are actually trying to sabotage women from finding happiness and fulfillment. It goes both ways, fellas. Anyway, my final conclusion, keep talking. All this is just grasping at straws to keep women quiet and content with the bare minimum. And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please like if you enjoyed the video, dislike if you didn't, subscribe if you found yourself enjoying my content in general and aren't yet subscribed, and let me know what you think below. I would like to give extra thanks to my patrons. My socials, sources, and resources are linked below, and Merry Solstice.